Okay, let's jump right into our sources today. First up, we're looking at a piece called Lawfare Against Terror, India's International Strategy.
Hmm.
This one explores a really interesting angle.
Mm.
Using international law, not just, military force or traditional politics, to deal with terrorism allegedly coming from Pakistan.
Right. Lawfare. It's a specific strategy.
Exactly. And the article talks about using existing international agreements like the SARC Regional Treaty or the International Convention for the Suppression of Financing of Terrorism, the ICSFT, that one.
And the terrorist bombing convention, too.
Yeah, those. And these treaties, they basically require countries to make terror financing illegal and actively stop it. The source mentions things like the 2008 Mumbai attacks, which it notes Pakistan later admitted some involvement in, and the more recent Pahalgam attack.
As examples suggesting a pattern,
Yeah.
according to the article.
Right. A pattern of support for terrorism against India.
Hmm.
So the idea is build a legal case using this evidence, presented in international forums, a narrative based on facts.
And what's really interesting here, I think, is the shift in strategy. This isn't just diplomatic complaining. It's about grounding the whole argument in international law.
Making it formal.
Precisely. And the article points out something really key. Many of these conventions have these things called compromissory clauses.
Okay, what are those?
They're like built-in dispute resolution mechanisms. They can allow a country to take another country to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, directly over the treaty.
Ah, so it potentially gets around the usual problem where a country has to agree to be sued.
Exactly. That's a big deal. It could open a path to hold Pakistan legally accountable, similar maybe to how Ukraine sued Russia under that same ICSFT convention.
Okay, that sounds powerful. So if these legal tools are there, why isn't it simple? What's the catch?
Well, that's a really important question. The source highlights two big hurdles. First, Pakistan actually has a reservation against the ICJ's jurisdiction when it comes to the ICSFT.
A reservation, like they opted out of that part.
Kind of, yeah. They formally stated they don't accept the ICJ's automatic jurisdiction under that specific treaty. And second, and this is maybe a bit surprising, India itself has a reservation regarding the ICJ's jurisdiction under the Terrorist Bombing Convention. Pakistan doesn't have one for that convention.
Oh, wow. So India might need to change its own stance there.
The article suggests that, India might need to withdraw its reservation to pursue that particular avenue. It also warns that the ICJ, well, it might interpret these treaties quite narrowly.
Meaning the evidence needs to be absolutely rock solid.
Foolproof, basically. And the legal strategy needs to be really well thought out. The source even suggests looking at dissenting opinions in past ICJ cases like Ukraine versus Russia for clues on how the court might think.
Okay, so wrapping up this first source, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener? It really shows how these international legal tools can be potentially applied in very real, very tense geopolitical situations. It's a different way of looking at conflict beyond just military or political moves.
It's a strategy focused on accountability through law, but, and this is crucial, the path to actually getting a ruling at the ICJ and what that ruling might be faces some pretty significant, maybe even unexpected challenges.
Right, so the goal might not just be a legal win in court, but also using the whole process to influence the global conversation, the narrative around the issue.
Exactly. Okay, shall we shift gears?
Let's do it. Next, we dive into safeguarding India's urban forests. This is an explainer about the, well, absolutely vital role these green spaces play in Indian cities, especially with all the rapid growth and the threats they're facing because of it.
Urbanization is the big driver of the threat here.
Definitely. It uses the example of Kanchikachiboli in Hyderabad. Apparently, there was an attempt to give away forest land for industrial development. Trees were cut down.
Which led to protests, right?
Yeah, protests, and eventually the Supreme Court had to step in. The article also lists some other key urban forests, Array in Mumbai, Chorahali in Bengaluru, the Ridge in Delhi, places that are crucial for making city life healthier.
Absolutely crucial.
And it cites studies, like one from the U.S., suggesting just 1 hectare of trees can pull about a ton of air pollutants out of the air each year.
Wow, a ton. That's significant.
It is. Plus, they help fight that urban heat island effect. Where cities get way hotter than the countryside.
Because of all the concrete and asphalt trapping heat, yeah.
Right. And they manage stormwater runoff, provide places for people to just relax, get away from the hustle and bustle, social benefits too.
And if you think about the bigger picture, losing these forests, Well, it has really severe consequences, especially when you look at the air quality problems in cities like Delhi. It's alarming.
It really underscores why policies, and maybe even more importantly, court interventions, are so needed.
Definitely. India does have policies. The National Forest Policy, the Green India Mission, they encourage planting trees. And newer things like the Smart Cities Mission are supposedly integrating ecological design.
But you mentioned the courts playing a big role.
A huge role. The source talks about the Gaudavarman case from way back in 1996. That was landmark. It basically broadened the legal definition of what counts as a forest.
Ah, so it wasn't just about officially designated forests anymore.
Exactly. And that led to orders for states to actually inventory all forest lands. The article also points to specific High Court and Supreme Court actions protecting the Delhi Ridge, stopping tree felling in Erie.
So they're using the Constitution.
Yes, specifically the right to a healthy environment, which falls under Article 21, the right to life. It's being used as a powerful legal shield for these green spaces.
And the government's doing things too. You mentioned policies, but are there specific programs?
Yeah, the article mentions the Nagar Vanyokana, launched in 2020. The goal is to develop 1,000 urban forests by 2027.
1,000, okay. Has it made a difference?
The article suggests it has contributed to an increase in reported tree and forest cover, so there's some progress there.
So putting this all together for you, the listener, those green patches in your city or near it, they aren't just pretty, they're like essential infrastructure for your health, for the city's well-being, and keeping them safe. It's an ongoing fight. It involves policy, laws, court cases, and importantly, citizen action.
A constant balancing act between development and environment.
Exactly. Okay, moving now to a major health challenge. Our next deep dive is into tackling antibiotic resistance, challenges, and innovations. This piece actually starts with a very personal and tragic story.
Yeah.
A man named Viswanathan, a stroke patient who died partly because of infections that just wouldn't respond to antibiotics.
It really brings home the human cost of AMR, antimicrobial resistance.
It does. The article explains what AMR is basically: bacteria evolving to beat the drugs we use against them. And the numbers, they're quite stark. AMR was linked to 1.27 million deaths globally back in 2019.
And projected to cause almost 2 million direct deaths a year by 2050.
Yeah, direct deaths. The WHO calls it one of the top 10 global health threats. And a primary cause, according to this source, misuse and overuse of antibiotics.
And not just in people, right?
Right. Only about 30% of use is in humans. The bigger chunk is apparently in livestock, farming, fish farming.
And then there's the issue of getting antibiotics without a prescription.
Exactly. Over-the-counter sales, especially in countries like India, are cited as a major factor driving resistance.
But there's some good news on the innovation front, isn't there?
There is. And this is where it gets, as the article puts it, really interesting. After like 30 years without a totally new class of antibiotic discovered globally,
A 30-year drought.
an Indian company, Wockhardt, has launched nifithromycin, brand name McNaff. It's India's first indigenously developed antibiotic in its class.
That's a massive scientific achievement. Took them 15 years.
Huge. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? The article suggests that even with breakthroughs like this, there are still major hurdles in the system.
Yeah, that's the tough part. The article highlights some really significant gaps in India's healthcare system that make fighting AMR difficult, even with new drugs.
Like what?
Well, Visak, the son of the patient mentioned at the start, he points to things like communication issues between doctors or departments, maybe the quality of equipment, and really frustrating delays in getting diagnoses. He mentions waiting a whole week for an antibiogram.
A week. To find out which drug might actually work.
Exactly. And in that time, the infection can get much worse. Or doctors might use broad-spectrum antibiotics unnecessarily, which fuels resistance. Experts in the source add other systemic issues: understaffing in hospitals, really high patient loads that make proper antibiotic stewardship, like careful prescribing, very hard.
Plus self-medication and the lack of enforcement against selling antibiotics without prescriptions.
Right. All these things together raise a really critical question. How do we make sure a new drug like nifithromycin actually stays effective long-term if these fundamental problems aren't tackled?
It's a good question. Is the government doing anything?
The government is taking steps. There are surveillance networks trying to track resistance patterns. A national action plan was launched back in 2017, and there are efforts to promote public awareness.
But is the awareness getting through?
Apparently, awareness about the appropriate use of antibiotics is still pretty low. People might still take them for colds or the flu, viral infections where they do absolutely nothing except maybe contribute to resistance.
So it's not just a science problem.
Not at all. The source really stresses that fighting AMR needs collective responsibility. It involves healthcare providers, patients, policymakers, the agriculture sector, everyone. It also touches on the economic challenges for drug companies. Developing new antibiotics is super long, super expensive, and often doesn't bring a big financial return.
Which is why many big pharma companies got out of the game.
Exactly, leaving it mostly to smaller companies. Plus, there can be hurdles with getting clinical trials approved.
So for you, the listener, what does this all mean? Well, it's a stark reminder that every time you think about taking an antibiotic, especially without a clear need and a doctor's okay, you're part of this massive global fight.
Access and affordability of new drugs, when they are developed, are also key. Wockhart's plan to price nifithromycin differently in different countries speaks to that.
And that opening story about Vsok and his father really hits home the urgent need for better diagnostics, faster results, better communication in hospitals, and just much better education for everyone about how precious these medicines are.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted challenge.
Okay, let's switch gears again. Our next deep dive is into the world of tech and global trade. Tariffs reshaping global AI landscape. This piece looks at how the potential for renewed, maybe quite substantial, tariffs, particularly thinking about the upcoming U.S. election, could really shake up the global supply chains that power AI development.
Right, the hardware side of AI, the chips.
Exactly. The article points out that tariffs push up the cost of critical components. Things like those specialized AI accelerators, advanced logic chips, stuff that's heavily sourced from places like China, Taiwan, Mexico, Vietnam.
And the potential tariff levels are high.
Projected to be as high as 27% on some components by 2025. The big risk identified here is that this makes building AI infrastructure, think massive data centers inside the U.S., incredibly expensive.
Potentially driving that kind of investment, that construction elsewhere.
That's the concern raised, yeah. It could even push it abroad.
Now, if we connect this to standard economic theory, tariffs are supposed to encourage domestic production, right?
That's the idea. And the article does note the U.S. is projected to triple its semiconductor manufacturing capacity. So some domestic boost is expected.
The source highlights the complexity here. AI hardware isn't simple. It relies on a really spread out global network of specialized capabilities. Trying to wall off parts of that network with tariffs, it creates inefficiencies.
Makes things clunkier, more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. The article argues that this kind of protectionism often ends up costing economic efficiency and can actually dampen innovation. It raises production costs, discourages investment. It mentions studies suggesting tariffs can lower overall output growth, and that reversing some recent U.S. tariffs could actually have led to significant economic gains over time. Economists call this loss of potential value a deadweight loss.
Deadweight loss.
Yeah.
Like wasted potential because of friction in the system. So how does this tariff situation specifically hit AI innovation?
That's a key question. Tariffs can sort of shield domestic firms from global competition, which might reduce their pressure, their incentive to innovate aggressively. Plus, it can limit access to cutting-edge foreign technologies that might be needed to push AI forward. So you get that deadweight loss again, missed opportunities for advancement.
And the scale of infrastructure needed for AI is massive, isn't it?
Huge. The demand for AI chips requires enormous increases in data center power capacity. We're talking dramatic jumps projected in the next few years. If a country can't build out that infrastructure efficiently because of costs or supply chain issues,
It could fall behind competitively.
absolutely. Access to powerful, often expensive computing infrastructure is a primary factor determining who leads in AI innovation. So tariffs could actually end up making global inequalities and AI capabilities even worse.
Okay, so where does a country like India fit into this U.S.-China dynamic?
The article positions India as a potential strategic third option, a potential partner or alternative hub in this tech rivalry.
Why India?
Well, India has a strong background in IT services and exports. AI and digital engineering are growing fast there. The government is making investments in semiconductors and R&D. Plus, India has advantages like lower labor costs, relatively speaking, and a very large pool of engineering graduates.
But there are challenges for India, too.
Definitely. India still relies heavily on imported hardware for its AI goals. So if global tariffs push up the cost of those chips and components, it could slow down India's own ambitions, even if it's seen as a strategic alternative.
Interesting dynamic. The article also mentions a kind of unexpected consequence of rising hardware costs.
Yes, this is fascinating. It notes that because the hardware is getting so expensive, partly due to these trade tensions, there's an accelerating shift towards optimizing what you already have.
Making the software smarter to compensate for expensive hardware.
Pretty much. Focusing on algorithmic efficiency, making the AI model smaller and more efficient through techniques like model compression. Economists actually have a term for this: capital substitution. You're substituting smarter software and algorithms, a form of capital, for more expensive physical hardware, another form of capital.
And this is actually driving down the cost of using AI models.
Dramatically, yes. It also suggests tariffs might, maybe unintentionally, speed up the decentralization of AI development, like the move towards custom chips designed for specific tasks, ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits.
Less reliance on general-purpose chips.
Potentially. The article draws a parallel to this shift from giant mainframes to personal computers distributing the computing power.
Okay, so the big takeaway for you here. Global trade policy, things like tariffs, they aren't just abstract economic debates. They directly impact the cost, the availability, and maybe even the fundamental way AI tools are built and used tools you might interact with every day.
It's all deeply interconnected.
Absolutely. Okay, finally, let's explore a really interesting societal shift. Urban India's retirement community boom. This explainer looks at why these residential complexes, designed specifically for senior citizens, are gaining traction. And it makes a point to clarify, these are not your traditional old-age homes.
Right. They're positioned as a choice for quality of life, for independence, but with services built in.
Exactly. The article shares stories from residents. One woman, Sharada, found just managing her household alone was getting tough. Another couple, Ashish and Dapasri, were worried about what happens if one gets sick? They didn't want to burden their kids who have their own busy lives.
That concern about burdening children seems like a major factor.
It does. And interestingly, the article notes that children were sometimes skeptical at first, but often came around after actually visiting the places. The COVID-19 pandemic also apparently boosted interest. Residents felt safer, well looked after during lockdowns, with medical teams and ambulances right there.
That makes sense. Having dedicated support during a crisis like that would be a huge draw.
Definitely. So what's fascinating here is how these communities are really tapping into the needs of a generation of seniors who are used to living independently. Maybe they moved cities for work, lived on their own for years.
And as physical abilities, naturally decline a bit with age or health issues pop up, the convenience factor becomes huge. Things like having food options available so you don't have to cook every meal, or having maintenance and upkeep taken care of.
The article points out this is a particular plus for women, right? Often freeing them from the traditional burden of cooking and household management.
Yes, allowing them more time for hobbies, socializing, other interests. But it does require a mindset shift, the article says. A willingness to compromise, maybe, compared to living in your own standalone house.
So who are they best suited for? Does the article give a sense of that?
It seems perspectives varied a bit among the residents they talked to. Some felt they're ideal for people coming from independent houses, where things like security and upkeep become bigger worries as you age.
Okay.
Others felt they were perhaps best for seniors living alone, or maybe those whose children live far away, even abroad.
What about people already living in, say, big apartment complexes with mixed ages?
That's where the consensus seemed to be that the benefit might be slightly less. If you're already in a vibrant apartment building with neighbors of all ages around, you might already have a good social network and some informal support.
So the main challenges there might just be the cooking and upkeep.
Possibly. Although the article does note that even in those mixed communities, the need for more dedicated help often ramps up significantly after age 70 or 75.
That makes sense. Now, the article mentions some potential reluctance, maybe concerns about it being only older people or not having kids right there.
Yeah, some initial hesitation is mentioned. But it also notes that children and grandchildren do visit often. They participate in activities. Sometimes these communities even interact with nearby mixed-age complexes, especially for things like festivals.
So it's not totally isolated.
Not necessarily. The key difference is the focus. All the activities, the services, the environment, it's all tailored specifically for seniors. It tends to be quieter, perhaps.
And the trend is growing.
Definitely growing. The article says people even in their 50s are starting to invest, maybe planning ahead. Sometimes they rent the property out first or shuttle between their old home and the community to kind of test the waters.
Okay, so the final takeaway for you on this one. These retirement communities show society is adapting. changing family structures, people living longer, evolving needs. They're leading to new models for senior living.
It's really a look at how urban Indians are thinking proactively about their later years. Prioritizing independence, yes, but also access to care when needed, and importantly, an active social life.
Challenging some of those traditional ideas about aging and who provides care. It's a fascinating shift to watch. Thank you for listening. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about.